Well, it's great to be here with you. My name is John Sanei. I am classically called the futurist, but what I like to do is I decode the future to simplify it so that leaders can make better decisions with the information. I have written a bunch of books around the topic, and also I do master classes on the subject, and I'm also an entrepreneur involved in a couple different businesses. Adaptability and change are by far the most important skills we could be developing within ourselves. And I think there's three ways for us to think about adaptability, very practical ways. The first step is the simplification of the future, the simplification of technology and all the changes that are coming. The quote, complexity is the enemy of execution comes to mind when things are too complex. We delete them, we distort them, and we generalize them and never really take action on them. So the first step is to simplify the future. The second step is to elevate our awareness, elevate our consciousness, and elevate our perspective of what's possible in the future. And when we're able to elevate our perspective, we start to see new possibilities that were otherwise literally not available to us. And a great quote that underpins this idea is from Einstein. He says, "You cannot solve a problem from the same awareness that created it." The third thing we have to do is we have to restructure our thinking and restructure our organizational structures. Because if we don't restructure how we think, then we'll continue doing the same things. And if our organizations aren't restructured into dual teams, into today and tomorrow teams, we're asking the same people to be both innovative and disruptive. And we all know this doesn't work. So really adaptation or change requires simplification, elevation, and restructuring on a continuous basis, which really isn't an easy process. But once you have the roadmap, then it becomes a lot simpler to follow. So the big question is, are we going to be replaced by AI? And definitely some parts of what we do will be replaced. But remember that just like our physicality got replaced by industrialization, so will our intelligence and logical thinking be replaced by AI. And I think what AI is going to do is going to force us to become more human than ever before. When we have gotten all the rudimentary, logical, outcome-based thinkings out the way, what's left is human connection. What's left is for us to see other humans and the environment around us in brand new ways, moving from survival to a hyper abundance reality that we're all moving into. So I'm incredibly excited about it. And let me just give you a caveat is that it's not going to be an easy process, but it never really is easy moving through paradigm shifts. But it really becomes an incredible privilege of choice that we have individually to elevate our awareness, to start to look for new solutions, and to really start to think about how we're going to show up in brand new versions of ourselves. My last book was called Who Do We Become? And the question is really an important one for us to ponder on is, who am I evolving into in this new world? Because I truly need to understand that I can't show up like I used to or who I used to be, because the value won't be as relevant in this new world. So AI coming, yes, there'll be many changes. Yes, there'll be many disruptions, but just like none of us are farmers anymore, many of us won't be in logical outcome-based thinking. We'll move much more into human connection, human collaboration, and really much more human than we've ever been. So I have two books coming out in 2025. The first one is called Future Memories. And I've written this book because through my research, I've started to realize that as human beings, without us even realizing, we are in memory repetition. Neuroscience, in fact, tells us that by the time we're 35 years old, we have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day, of which 90% are the same thoughts as yesterday, which means that our brains are familiarity machines. And so the whole point of the book is, how do we make decisions based on where we're going rather than where we've been? And if we understand this dynamic, we start to realize that we have to move away from a brain that is about familiarity and move to a brain that's about exploration. And this all requires us to think about the future in brand new ways and to calm our nervous systems so that we can apply ourselves in rewiring the way we think about how we think. And so Future Memories is really this urge to the reader to realize and to become aware that our past memories are not what's going to get us into the future. And we have to rewire, rethink, and recalibrate our thinking and behavior towards where we're going and rather than where we've been. The second book I'm bringing out this year is called The Expansive. And this is a book that's based on our award-winning podcast called The Expansive. We are in episode 280. We've won Podcast of the Year last year. And the year before, we won the Entrepreneurship Podcast of the Year. And what we've done is we've taken the 280 episodes and we fine-tuned them into 52 chapters to help you live a life that's more expansive, both in work and in your personal life. And by combining the ideas of business and personal life into one book, it allows us to approach the future in a more holistic way and ultimately living more expansively rather than in the world that we are in today, that most people are shrinking due to fear or anxiousness. We want you to really be more expansive in the way you approach your life so that you're optimistic about what's coming, even though it might be uncertain. Well, every episode is really a joy for us because what we've decided to do in the podcast is to be truly authentic in the way we approach the podcast. And we recently did a podcast on custodianship. And I really love this word custodianship because what custodianship means is to think beyond yourself, to think long term, called cathedral thinking or the 1,000-year thinking approach. The Native Americans called it the seventh generational approach, where you're thinking about what you're doing today and how it's going to impact 7 generations down. I think that if all humans were able to adopt a custodianship of themselves and their environments, we would be living in an incredible world. And so the last episode we did on custodianship really has still got me thinking about it in such a deep way. And how am I showing up as a custodian to my friends, to my body, to my apartment, to hotels I stay in? I have a very good friend, Manish, who every time he stays at a hotel or an Airbnb, he makes a point of leaving it cleaner than when he found it. That's being a custodian of what you take care of and how you show up in life. And so custodianship has been my favorite episode this year so far. So, for 10,000 years in the agricultural era, we focused on PQ, physicality quotient. The most important thing we could do was follow our forefathers, understand the seasons, and bring our physicality to the world. When the Industrial Revolution arrived, PQ got taken away. And we had to now fit into a system, follow the process of education and organizational structures, be outcome-based in our thinking, and IQ was celebrated mostly. But as AI comes and takes that out the way, we start to realize that AQ becomes by far more important than IQ. Not that we won't need IQ, but AQ, the adaptability quotient, requires us to unlearn, to relearn, to release parts of our identity, to adopt new parts of our identity. And AQ is really underpinned by EQ, by emotional intelligence. And there's so much written about emotional intelligence, but I think the most important line that I have seen about emotional intelligence for us to ponder on is, how long does it take you to recover from a trigger? And if you're able to recover from a trigger quickly, your adaptability quotient is very high, which means your emotional quotient is very high. But if you're stuck defending trauma, defending a trigger point, it means that you just can't move forward. You keep defending what you know, even though you might not like it. I mean, nobody likes sulking. Nobody likes losing their temper, but we somehow move into a place of protectiveness rather than exploration. So the future requires a much more emotional type of human that we don't quite understand the currency for as yet, because I'm sure many people will say, well, how will I pay rent with being nice to somebody or collaborating? We don't quite know that, and nobody can really project into that. But just remember that if you went back to the farmers in the agricultural era and said, soon you're going to need to be an accountant, a lawyer, HR, IT, they wouldn't even know what you were talking about. It would be a totally new language. So we mustn't be too stuck on what it's going to be, but actually just focus on the preparation of ourselves to be more adaptable, to release identity, and to evolve or elevate our emotional intelligence. So I'm always excited about doing more talks and elevating more organizations and governments around the world. I'm also going into a few different businesses that I think are going to be the future. For example, I'm opening up a hotel based on a circular economy system. I do think that the future requires circular economies where we put money back into communities and elevate the communities in which we live in. I think the idea of capitalism has been fantastic and pushed humanity into a fantastic place, but we do have a disparity of financial crucial situations around the world. And I want to not just be speaking about the solutions, but really becoming part and parcel of the transformation of humanity, moving away from extraction to exploration, from competition to collaboration. So besides writing more books, doing more podcasts, and doing more talks, I also am becoming much more involved in actually helping this transformation come into fruition.